I've been hearing lots of people talk about virtual internships over the past number of weeks and months, and I wanted to share some insights about what it's like to be a company that participates in one. Last May 2019, we participated in one with the University of California, San Diego, arising from our work with the Irish Business Forum, San Diego. And I have to say, just top line summary, it was great. We had a great experience. I would highly recommend any business to engage with it. Really enjoyed working with the people who worked with us. And I do think that on reflection, I would like to think that they had a good experience too, but I do think that we learned from it. And some of those learnings I'm going to share with you today. So first of all, I would say, make sure that when you're taking on the intern that you understand what they want out of it. Don't expect them to just be grateful because you're giving them the opportunity. You may know it's an opportunity, but they're young yet. Give them time and just ask them why. Why are they participating in this? Is it for experience? Is it for opportunity? Is it to put in the CV? Is it to have a conversation to talk about in an interview at a later stage? Is it to glean technical expertise? What is it? And also I found in our experiences that their answer to that might actually change over the course of the internship, which is great because of course then you're giving them a holistic experience. But just don't presume. Don't presume that they should be really grateful because you're giving this. And of course, it probably is a wonderful opportunity that you're giving them. But as I say, they may not know that yet. And just bring that out of them and bring them along in that way. The second thing is, I found it was really good to give them discrete tasks to do. And particularly, just like you'd manage anybody, I explained them first and I gave them ways in which to do whatever they needed to do and, milestones, and then they came back and we reflected on it. And I found that the way in which they wanted to work, they weren't necessarily sure of. So when I said at the beginning, do you want to work in groups? Do you want to work on a one-to-one basis with me? Do you want to simply interact on our Slack channel? They didn't know. And of course, you know what? That makes sense. How would they know? They're unlikely to be self-aware in a working environment since they haven't been in particularly a professional working environment before. So I would also say that part of our role as a company that takes somebody on as an intern is that it's important to help them develop their own self-awareness, both by asking them questions and giving them the space to reflect and analysing those reflections with them. And by giving them the tasks to do, sometimes I'd say, okay, here is a step-by-step guide on what to do and let's review your output. And then other times I would say, okay, let's have a Zoom call. We're just going to leave it on, right? We're just going to leave it on. I'm going to do what I need to do. You're going to do what you need to do. But just like we would be in a virtual office, shout if you need me. So therefore we worked in tandem as if they were working beside me in the office sometimes, so that then they could nudge me if they needed something. And I found that often worked very well. It's just because they were in California didn't mean that they couldn't have that same kind of in the office feeling as some of the other people that I work with. I would also say that they can give you a huge insight into the next generation. Massively so. Like, I'm very fortunate that I get to work with a lot of teenagers through 17 Academy, and we facilitate transition year work experiences. Now, transition year, to those of you who may not be familiar with it, it's a year in the Irish education system when people are about 15, 16, 17. And they might get a week to work in a company, and then our business, we facilitate a week working in whatever company that might be, and we take care of them. So during that time frame, I have gotten very accustomed to listening to the views of 15, 16, 17-year-olds, and they're fascinating. And I've shared videos about it before. But when you're dealing with people who may be 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, they're much closer to the workplace and getting into it. But they also have an awful lot of interesting things to share, whether it's about social media or the values that they want to bring into the workplace, or the views of business and how business interacts with CSR and the non-monetary benefits that they might want, and various different things along the way. So what I would say is that when you're giving an opportunity to an intern, there's that, what we call reverse mentoring opportunity as well, that can be really rich for both of you. And the reason that I say it's rich for both of you is when I was having these chats with our interns about what they thought about these things, they mentioned to me that it was interesting to be asked their opinion. No one else really does in the workplace. And of course, again, that's understandable because they haven't been there before. But just that you can pay a very well paid consultant who will do a great job in getting them for you, or they can be right there in front of you as well, just simply had over coffee. Now, another thing that I used to do is every week when we were working on the workload for this particular week, I would also say to them, how could you take that particular task and turn it into an interview ready conversation? So I remember in one case, we were building a new WordPress website, and I had one of them work on that with me. And that was where I had, okay, we'll have the Zoom call, and we have spent a lot of time, working on WordPress over the years. I've developed a fair bit of experience in it. I'm not an expert by any means, but I know what to do in it. And in that case, I said to her, okay, if you're ever asked in an interview a question like, tell me about a time that you had to take on a technical project and you hadn't been familiar with the technology before, then I said, this is an example of that. Or tell me about a time that you worked remotely on a project. Again, this is an example of that. And that probably was one of the biggest benefits that our interns took out of it, was the stories, the narratives that ultimately they were living through, that maybe they didn't crystallize in their minds, or maybe wouldn't have been as articulate to describe. But me being the older one and the more experienced one, that was one of the things that I felt was important to do, was to point that out to them. Probably the biggest challenge I found was trying to build rapport in a completely digital environment. Now, lots of you know all about that over the past couple of months, but when you're taking on a new hire, that's difficult. But when you're taking on someone who might be that bit younger, they're trying to build, their office etiquette without being in an office. They're trying to understand how to participate in a professional conversation that is ultimately informal. And you can't blame them for feeling that is a little bit difficult. So again, I had to work at that harder than they maybe saw, but I saw it as my job. It was my job to do that. And it's very different to be able to say to somebody, okay, you know what, let's go out for coffee and just have a chat. It's very, very different to do that. And yes, you can have these kind of informal chats over Zoom, but it's just different. So what I would say is that bit has to be worked on more than in an office environment. And it's really crucial. It's really crucial to do it. So the last thing I just want to mention is there is a cost-benefit analysis and everything. And the investment that we put into this was our time and our, building of relationship, and knowing that if we gave them something to do that was mission critical, it wasn't the right thing to be giving them. It's not fair to be putting, normal business deadlines on people who are learning from scratch and so on. So that was our cost, I suppose. The benefit of it was, as I mentioned, was the reverse mentoring, was the experience of working with people in a different part of the world exclusively online. It was also really interesting to get the California or the US vision on certain things, on our products. And one of them was particularly good at pushing back, which I thought was great. He used to really kind of say, I'm not quite sure the value proposition of this, or I'm not really sure about how this really fits in with what you're saying. And that was excellent. That was really, really, really good to hear, particularly from that age group, because diversity is so important. We all know that. Diversity is so important. And this was a real demographic diversity that we had going on in the business, which was brilliant. What I also found as well is that there's a real sense of achievement, I suppose, or reward in enabling these younger people to become more conscious and more aware of their employability, and also in helping them become more self-aware. That will ultimately have a great effect on them in future years. And now I also have an insight into what's coming. I also have an insight into what, and of course, you can't extrapolate what you would work with a couple of people as an entire generation, but just, I got insights that were useful, that were really, really useful. And of course, the obvious thing is that they did deliver on certain tasks as well that did help in the overall driving forward of a very new part of our business too. So I would say, all that told, if you're thinking about doing this, and if you want to reach out to me and have an individual conversation about this, maybe it's something you're thinking of doing or participating in or whatever, send me a message on LinkedIn. I'll happily have a chat with you. But I just wanted to say that lots of people are considering doing this for the first time. As the proverb says, if you want to know the road ahead, ask those coming back. So I thought it might be useful to share this with you today. And best of luck both to you and to the interns who are interested in participating with this. We're certainly going ahead again, and I wish you all the very best.